So welcome back. So let's try and do a basic validation of the object we're getting in the create. Now this is just one way to validate, and it's a pre-built one that's already ready to use in the controller. That's why I'm showing you. So if you want to do just a basic validation of the object, you can actually go in here and use something called TryValidate. So what we actually can do is something like this: TryValidateModel like this, and then we can pass in the object we want to try and validate. Oh, that's called cost right here. There we go. So this is actually a way where we can try just to validate if this object right here is actually allowed to be saved in the database. Now again, to do this, because we want to end up actually returning an action result, we can say if we cannot validate the object, so if not try validate, so if we can't validate this object, then we need to return a bad status code, right? Or whatever code you guys figured out you want to use. So I'll just do a return bad request right here, return bad request, object not valid, something like this. Now this is very basic what I'm doing right here, but if everything is okay, like always, we're just going to return an okay right here. There we go. Now we actually return this. So how do we then validate this? Because I don't want the logic of validating to be inside the UI, and that's why I'm just making this TryValidateModel right here, because I can actually put the logic somewhere else, and that's using something called DataAnnotations. The data annotations we can start using inside a customer business object. So I'm going directly down the customer business object, and here we can actually add something right here, and let me just try and add it, called required. Notice the square bracket right here. That actually means that I'm going to add a data annotation right here. And if you control dot, because it doesn't know this guy yet, let me just zoom. So I do the control dot, and it'll pop up and explain to me, I'll help you, my friend. Don't you want to use the data annotation from the component model? And I'll say, yes, I do. Now what I actually did was I explained to the model that when you're creating this guy, you cannot create him unless you put in a first name. At least I can validate that for you. So let's try now to run the system where we now have said, try to validate the customer model, and if it's not valid, just set back object is not valid, and if it is valid, then we'll actually start creating the object. Let's try and run this again. Inside the IIS here. Now, while this starts up, let me try and show you, because there's a lot to pick from. This is just an example about some of the model validation you can actually do. You have required, you have string length, which is of course max length. You have classic movie, I don't know what that is, but that's probably a custom property. Data type, it needs to be a date. You have a range, you have a minimum length, you have maximum length. You have so many to pick from in these validation types. And I'll try and put a link in the description where you can actually go and find all the different validation types. But it's easier just to Google when you need one and go and find it that way. The program is up and running. Let's try and actually go in now and post a new customer. So I'm doing post here. And again, I've just started with a new solution just to do a recap of some of the things I've done. I'm doing a post here. And now with the post, I can go into the body. Normally it's on form data, but I'm switching to raw. And then I need to switch to JSON. You have to remember that. And here I'm just going to paste in an actual customer. So I've pasted in a new customer, but you have to notice I forgot the first name. It's not there, and that was required. So let's see what happens when I do a send here. I get an object not valid, bad request. And that's actually because if I put in a breakpoint here, let's try and do this again, and I actually do the request now. There we go. Now I'm actually hitting the breakpoint, and notice the customer model does not contain a first name. And I'm saying if you want to create a customer model now, I just change things around in the business object and say the customer name is actually required. So you cannot create an object from the outside like this. I'll validate that you have a first name. If you don't, you'll actually get into this Boolean value right here, and then I'll send back a bad request. You're not allowed to create this guy. There we go. Now this could be put down into the business object, the business logic layer, and we'll try and look at that later on. But I just wanted to show you a very easy way using the controller to actually do a validation. And let's just try and create this guy again, and this time we'll actually add a first name as well. There we go. First name. Let's just call this guy Billy. Billy, there we go. And I'll do a send again. And now we get in here, and now the customer should actually be validated. So if I step over, I'm getting down, I'm actually creating the customer, and again returning this time an actual okay. Created him, and there we go. And there's actually another, you can go and find that yourself. You could actually return another status code saying object created, something like that. So that's perfect. Next lesson, I'll just show you a few more data annotations, and then we'll continue to something completely different. See you next time.